rolling.
initially, anyway, and so on, so we get a picture of what was
Speed.
happening.
Mic out.
Oh, okay. My name is Joni-Sue Blinderman. I'm here with Mr. Arthur Rubin on April 1st, 1993 at the Museum of Jewish Heritage as part of the Video History Project of Holocaust Survivors. This is tape 3. Mr. Rubin, if you could begin by telling us about what life was like for you, daily life in Auschwitz, how long you were there, where you were living, if you were in contact with a brother and sister who were also selected to live, and kind of get a picture of what was going on there, what you understood was happening there, what this place was about.
Well, as I said, we arrived to Auschwitz June 29th, and we were taken to Camp E, which was called the Gypsy Camp. And at that time this was a Gypsy camp, but when we were coming, when the big transports were coming from Hungary, it was primarily Hungarian Jews who were coming into the camp, and it was all for youngsters. I was placed into into barrack or block 11. But I remember when we arrived to Auschwitz, we just didn't know what was happening. We just we didn't know what's taking place, and we were being pushed from here to there, rushed from place to place, and it wasn't orientation that now you have over here when you go into the army or whatever. You're just being told to go here and go there, and you just follow orders. And I remember for some reason we were taken in this one particular barrack. I don't think it was our barrack, and it was lunchtime, and they were giving out soup. And now they had no utensils. What used to be is they had a plate, and they assigned to about 4 or 5 people to use this plate. It was handed from person to person, and you take a sip, and you take a sip, and you go. I remember when I came to my turn to take a sip from this soup, it had such a terrible odor, such a terrible taste that I couldn't taste it. I couldn't have any soup. I just as hungry as I was, I couldn't partake from the soup. But what I remember more than that soup was that there was it may have been for the purpose of introducing us to what camp life is all about. Somebody who was in the camp prior to us did some infringement, violated some law. What could that be? Maybe he went to a pot where they had the soup, and he gets some soup out, or whatever. I mean, there was nothing major you could do there, or maybe something minor, or he didn't walk right, or whatever, and he was being punished. And the reason I remember is because this was my first sight of punishment in a camp. And I remember the capo. Now this was not a capo that I mentioned to you before, where they were humane like in a ghetto. This was already a hardened couple who was in the camp for many years, and you could tell who were there for many years because they usually were well fed, their uniform fitted well, and you could tell that they're old timers. They had insignias. You could tell whether he was a Jewish camper or he was. There was a yellow star for a yellow triangle for those who were Jews, red for those who were political, and green for those who were criminals. Because what happened was the criminals the criminals of the German jails were emptied out and put into the concentration camps, and they were put in charge. They became the capos or the camp leaders. These are killers, brutal people. And also political leaders who were there for political reasons, they also became a little hardened. They were not as liberal as they may have been before. And everybody is told to watch what's taking place here. This man has done some infringement, and it was announced in German. My German was very poor in those days. I don't know what was taking place, and he was punished. He was told to bend over, and this capo had a cane in his hand. Nice thick cane, and with his full power, 1, 2, hit him on his behind. He was supposed to give him 35 or 40 beatings, and the man was screaming, hollering, and by the time he got to 15, 20, the man could not stand up. He kept falling down. He's up. So people were holding him from 2 sides, and he was hitting him. And then he was told, this is for violating the rules of the camp. This was the first introduction in camp. and it put a terrible, terrible fear into us. Now, at this time, I had no idea what's taking place. I didn't know that people were killed or gassed. It so happens that this particular camp, Camp E, the gypsy camp, was fairly close to the crematorium, and we saw these tremendous chimneys. Flame was coming out almost constantly, and you could smell. There was a stench, and we were there for weeks. We didn't know what this is. We were told it's a bakery, because fortunately the camp that I was, the barrack that I was in, Barrack 11, was all people who just arrived or recently arrived from Hungary, and coming from having the experience of being hardened, coming from this society that I told you before, even the barrack leaders didn't tell us what's taking place. Inside the barrack, they were humane. There were so many of us in the barrack. We had in this barrack there was no beds, nothing. You probably seen some camps where they had triple-decker barracks. Here there was nothing. We were lying on the floor, but lying in such a manner that you couldn't lie down. You had to sit on the floor with your feet apart. Another person was sitting next to you and next to you. And this is how you were sitting, this is how you were sleeping while you were in this camp, in this barrack. And if you had to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, it was chaotic, because now you had to climb on top of other people. People were asleep and suddenly somebody steps over you. And if you were asleep, you wake up to some screaming because somebody's climbing over you. It was just horrible. And by now, of course, the food was delicious. I couldn't wait for the soup that I didn't like the first day, because starvation was indescribable. You were walking around like a chicken looking on the ground. What can you find? The food consisted of a little black coffee in the morning, and lunchtime they had some soup. The soup consisted of hot water with a few vegetables here and there, and maybe some meat. I'm not sure, but it had no nourishment. And like I told you before, the coffee was given in a little plate or a little pot, and 5 of you. And now we all stood around, and we were watching each other. Nobody should take 2 sips instead of 1, or just take a normal. I mean, like, they were humiliating you to the level of an animal. That these are your friends. You're all in the same boat, but yet you are watching me, your friend. He shouldn't take 2 sips because now you will have less. And they gave you a piece of bread. It was dog bread, and we were watching. It was cut quickly, and hopefully, as you could eventually, it was your time to get your bread. You were hoping that I'll get that piece because that one is a hairline bigger than the previous. And you didn't know, should I eat the bread now, or should I save some for later? If you eat them now, then you're going to be hungry for later. If you save it for later, it may be stolen. It was a decision, like a big decision, but it was an important decision because this was on our mind. What should we do with the bread? And so this was our consistence: a piece of bread, the black coffee, and this little soup. And naturally, for getting to the line, make sure that there's enough soup, and fighting long lines constantly. And some people were trying to get out and get into the line first, and it was a very, very bad, very terrible scene. And so our constant talk was about food. What would be, food? And in my particular barrack, there were about 2 or 3 people from my hometown, which was a tremendous help, because we knew each other and it wasn't a stranger. But we also made friends pretty fast. People who came to the camp more or less the same day or day after, and we were all in the same boat. And we just sat around outside the barrack. They woke us up 5 in the morning. We had to go outside between the barrack. They used to line us up and have reveille. And because they used to count us in the morning and at night. And before the SS came was to go to the reveille, to count us, they used to practice with us, like the Marines, to put to come to tension, then shut, your head off, your head on, and for an hour. just to practice. So when SS comes there, you're going to act like Marines, not like a bunch of Boy Scouts, so to speak. And this was a very big thing, you know. Finally, the SS came and he counted you, and he just walked away, and then you were free. But meanwhile, in the morning it used to be cold, even though it was summertime. It was cold in the morning, and so now we were between the barracks. You didn't see a grass, you didn't see a tree. We were completely void of anything that you have seen before. Nothing. And we used to sit there and just talk about things that, you know, if we ever get free, what are we going to eat? We didn't, and we talked about our parents also, but we didn't know what's taking place. None of us knew what is taking place. And we were just very, very hungry. And this was going on for weeks, and then we knew that a lot of people are leaving because this was, like I said before, the only reason why we came into the camp is just so that they can send us through different part of Europe to work for the German war machine. Mm-hmm. And some people felt, well, it's the best this place is very dangerous, get out of here as soon as you can. And chances are, if you're going to get to a camp where you're going to work, maybe things will be a little better. Other people told us, don't stay as long as you can, because if you're going to go out and go to work, you don't know where you're going to wind up. You can wind up in a coal mine or work on the outside, mm-hmm. and with the nourishment that you will get, you cannot last very long. And they tell us people who left 2 months ago or so to work are being brought back as what they were called as Muslimen. I mean, people who are all skin and bone. And they're gonna your lifespan is over. So we didn't know what should we do. Should we stay? You know, these decisions that we had. Should we stay or should we go? Because each one had a negative and a positive. Mm-hmm. Well, somehow we stayed, and we kept losing weight. And even though they brought you in time to send you to camp, to send you out somewhere, but if you stayed here long enough and you weren't fed right, in 2 or 3 months you were in no longer physical position to condition to be sent to work in camps. So they had these. I'm skipping a lot of things because being in Auschwitz was just undescribable. Well, what happened was in July or so, people arrived from Poland to our camp. Not only children, but adults came into our camp from the city of Lodz. Lodz was a very big city, and Jews were in ghetto there for years and years already, and they suffered for years, unlike us it just started within the last 3-4 months. But these Polish people were in camp for years, and when they came into camp, and we met them, and we were telling them about a bakery, and they thought, what, are you crazy? What bakery? We thought for example, my brother, I'm jumping from scene to scene, my brother who came in, like I told you before, he was in the next camp, in the camp D. So there was a wire between us. But we found out each other where we were, because what happens is as soon as you met somebody, and this was all mostly at that time Hungarian people. He says, where are you from? Is anybody from the hometown? And he said, yes, somebody's from my hometown. What's his name? So I found out that my brother is in next camp, and there's a wire fence between us, and you couldn't go to the wire fence because there were the watchtowers. That he's in this other camp, he's in a D camp, and I was in 11, he was in 20. So eventually we met through the wire fence, and I found out that he's working in this section where they empty out the cars that arrive to Auschwitz. So he had availability of a bit of food, whatever. And I remember he used to throw over the fence, and there was another friend that is for my hometown. They were both together. They used to throw over the fence some food, some sugar, or a piece of bread, whatever, and it really meant a life-saving. I remember he also threw over a prayer book, which I had with me for the entire time of the camp. And my brother, he was on kosher food for as long as I can remember, because he was fortunate enough to be able to be in this place that he was able to get some food. Mm-hmm. So he ate bread or crackers, whatever he found on the train when he was emptying out the trains that arrived to Auschwitz. And we saw each other, not every night, but after work, we spoke to each other, and he didn't tell us, he knew what is happening because he was in a place where he was with adults, and he knew what happened to my mother and the rest of the family, but he never told us. Later in time, I found out that somehow there were people going from one camp to another camp to do some menial work, either to carry certain things or bring something back. I found out my sister is in a different camp, but with another group, and she found out that I'm in my camp. She saved a piece of her bread, and she sent a little piece of bread to me, and she was telling me that, she wrote me a little note. I don't know how she was able to get hold of a pencil, because there was nothing of the sort available, pencil, paper, there was nothing available. That she heard that our mother, with our rest of the families on the other side of the camp, there was a side of the camp with children, were twins who were kept there for another reason. But our mother was killed the same day. So she too was under the illusion that she didn't know what was happening. And eventually my brother went to a camp that he didn't survive the war. Neither did my sister. She must have gone somewhere else, and neither one of them survived the war. They must have wound up in other camps in Auschwitz. But what happened in Auschwitz was that we were there now for a couple of months, and now we knew what is happening. That we had no more illusion about bakeries. We knew that and these Polish people told us, "You parents are finished over there. Those who went to the other side, they were all killed." And I remember that it came back to me how I saw these people from my town, older people, with their hands in each other, walking together, and all these people, and I didn't even say goodbye to my mother. My mother was across from where I was. I didn't even say goodbye, or we didn't know. I mean, we had no idea that we'll never see each other. But at that time, you become hardened quite fast, and you really start to worry about yourself. And when I found out that what happened to my mother and my family, I don't remember crying. It was such an animal life that you lost feelings, or you had feelings, but you couldn't express your feelings. I remember crying when this happened. And now they had selections. What were these selections? You were in camp for 3-4 months now, or whatever length of time, and they felt that you are no condition to be sent out to work in any part of Germany or Poland, or wherever they need workers. So they had selections. When they had these reveilles, one in the morning, one at night, they had selections. And what happened was, an SS came around with a doctor, a German doctor, and they looked at you and told you, go here or go there. In other words, if you look very skinny, very emaciated, then they had selection. And they picked out two friends from my hometown, and they put them to a barrack, and the barrack was sealed, and they knew that they're going to be taken away to be gassed. And I remember the trucks came in the middle of the night, and we heard us screaming at night, while these kids, they opened the gates of the barracks, and they were shoved into the truck, and some of them were screaming Shema Israel or and this was the first selection. The first selection happened to be on Rosh Hashanah, on a day of Rosh Hashanah. It was almost like not only to destroy people, but it was to humiliation. It was on Rosh Hashanah. And now we were concerned about these selections. Are selections taking? This is a new fear. Are there more selections? And now we said, how long? Maybe we shouldn't stay here anymore, because now it's very dangerous to stay here. These selections are taking place. Then there was a second selection on Yom Kippur, and the selections were not always for an entire camp. They picked up half a dozen barracks, and they took care of those, because you more or less, even you had no more names. You had no more names. There was no list of your name. You were just a number. But you were assigned to a barrack, and you more or less people stayed in the barrack. And there was a person that I knew from Hungary, from a different city, and he told me, he says, there will be a selection in your barrack tonight, the night reveille. So see if you can go into another barrack. And I listened to him, and I went to a different barrack. And when the reveille took place and selection took place, I would say about 80% of the people were taken away. Had I been there, I would probably taken away myself. And I remember one scene when the selections took place in a different barracks, and we were standing while this was taking place. Everybody had to be in this reveille. It could not be dismissed. Everybody was dismissed in the entire camp. There were 30 barracks in each camp, all at the same time. I remember the scene where this father is in the line with us, This was later when adults were all mixed up with the children. He's in line with us, and he sees that people who were selected for a selection being marched away, and he sees this man. This man sees that his son is among the children who were picked out to be destroyed, and he starts screaming and yelling, and he wants to run towards him. I mean, it's just a reaction that he, without any thinking, and he was beaten up so badly. I think that was his final end. And so this was the second selection. One selection was simply they had a selection where it consisted of, they took a piece of board and they nailed it to a post. It was a soccer field in the end of the camp that's used by the SS to play soccer. And they took us out to the soccer field, and they nailed a piece of board to a certain height, and you had to go under. You had to go under this board. In other words, they have different methods of selecting who should live, who should die. This time it went by height. If you reached the height, then you went to one side. If you didn't reach the height, you went to the other side. And it just so happened that I was fairly tall for my age, and I thought I reached the height, and maybe was a little frightened not to cheat, and I reached the height and I went to one side. But my two very good friends that you saw the pictures of before, they were both short, and they didn't make the height, and they were told to go to the other side. And by this time we knew that what these selections mean, going to one side, the other side, and somehow, and they were kept together like in a group with SS surrounding them, but I guess there were too many kids and not enough soldiers, and they able to run away, and they ran away and they ran to the toilet, and they actually climbed into the hole, and they were hiding out until it was over, and they somehow they came out and cleaned themselves up as best they could, and they survived. So all these things were taken away. And so by now we were afraid that there's no point staying here any longer, because our chances of survival is very, very poor, because even though we're not going to work every day, but if you have these selections, then you can't survive. So the next transport that came, we said we volunteered to go. At times you could volunteer, at times they told you just go ahead. And we went on this, we were taken on this transport. Myself, there was a whole group of people, but I'm talking about friends. Myself and about 3 or 4 friends, 2 from my hometown. We went to the city of Brunswick, or Braunschweig in German. And we were put into a camp, and the camp leader was, when we got there, we all lined up for reveille and for orientation. And the camp leader was a German criminal, because I knew it because he had the green insignia, so he knew, and he spoke German perfectly. And he gave us introduction. He says, don't think that you're here for vacation. He says, you're not going to get chali for Shabbos or gefilte fish. He spoke Yiddish. He says, this is a camp for work, and if you're not going to work, we're going to send you out of here, which was a euphemism for being destroyed. And different people were assigned for different places. I was very fortunate. I was assigned to work in a factory, a truck factory called Büssingwerke, and they were making parts for trucks. And I was assigned to a German civilian, and this German civilian happened to be a decent person. After a while, in other words, he had this machine, and I had to stay with him, because as the machine was working, automatic machine, when you got to a certain stop, I had to push a button, then the machine stops, or the machine to start. And the work was not difficult. It was inside, because other people were working outside and cold. This was in the height of the winter, and it was very, very difficult. This particular German was helpful to me. Was very. He was a good person. I feel very bad that I never looked him up after the war. I told him what happened in Auschwitz, and he says, no, don't believe those things. You're gonna go home and you're gonna find your parents. He knew it's true, but he was a human being. He was trying to reassure me that things will get better. And he told some of his friends what's taking place. And when he used to go out for lunch, he used to bring back a piece of bread. And he had a lady friend who works in the factory, and she found out what's happening. So she made up a can, a little metal can with a cover, with a handle for me. And she says, look, when I go to the kitchen, because they didn't have that much food either, he said, I'm going to try to bring you some soup. But there was supposed to be no association, no communication between the civilians, German civilians, and people who were in camp. So she told me through, I don't know how, she never came over to me. She probably told my person that I was working for that when she's going to come back, she's going to put this can to a certain spot. And when she walks away, I should go there and pick up the can. And she used to help me, and she brought me some soup a couple of times a week, which was tremendous help because the soup was much, much better. It was much more nourishing. It was warm. And it was just a good feeling that she cared. And this person also, she used to get, the person that I was working for was he used to give me pieces of his food that he used to get. And I remember that this barrack, this factory from the place where we were staying, was maybe about a kilometer and a half. So we used to walk. This was in the winter month, dark. It was dark in the morning. We used to walk, with SS on all sides. And then as we used to walk, we used to look on the ground. And we saw a potato skin. We used to jump for it, all of us, like when you see birds jumping for food, and pick up a potato skin. And it was, the hunger was just, now you cannot describe what hunger is. Hunger and water. Water, we told that there was water in Auschwitz, but we told not to drink the water because it wasn't clean. You get the diphtheria and you will blow up and you will die. So we couldn't drink the water in Auschwitz. And in Braunschweig, it was just inhuman. And so by this, and I even used to pray. I had this prayer book that I mentioned before, and this person, this German, told me, go pray. He said in German, go pray. He put me on the corner on the side, and when SS used to walk back and forth to keep an eye on these people who were working there, just come on back because SS is coming. So he was a very decent person. And what happened was, after a while, every day almost like clockwork, the American bombers used to come around and bombing the different parts of the city. And when there was a, what is it called, when they had when these bombing take place, we had to, the sirens went off, and we had to run out and hide in the shelters. The shelters for us, of course, were separate from the civilians. It was not the greatest shelters, but it was some type of shelter. And this was going on for weeks until one day we come back and our plant, our factory was hit. So we lost our jobs, and it was no more use for us. And the camp in Braunschweig was not very pleasant either. It was, the food was similar to Auschwitz, maybe a shade better, not much better.
Was the camp right in the city of Braunschweig?
Yes, in the city, surrounded. People, there were homes. I was back in Braunschweig 2 years ago, but I had no idea. I couldn't find. I wouldn't even know where to look for the camp. I did find that place where I used to work, and I have a picture of it, just a sign, Büsingwerke, but the factory is no longer there. So the camp we used to work 6 days a week. Sunday we were off, and Sunday we had to do camp work, clean the camp, and things of that sort. And the life was a little better than Auschwitz because, first of all, you didn't see the crematoria, and your chance of survival, at least for me, was better because there was some food, and I wasn't working outside, so it was better. But I remember we were in camp, couldn't stay always unless you're sleeping outside, and it was cold. So what we used to do is stay together, all used to bunch up like chickens when you are animals when they're cold, like cows, or I don't know if you've ever seen animals, how they keep each other warm. We used to, if the sun was out, we used to go to the spot where the sun is shining and keep together. Unfortunately, by this time, we were full of lice. We were lice infected because there was no water, there was no sanitation. And so, but that was secondary. In other words, you stood next to a person. If you didn't have any bugs, you were bound to have him soon, or you gave him yours. But this, I used to keep each other warm. Fortunately, it was not a very cold winter, because I had frostbitten toes every year. My toes used to be frostbitten to the point that I had open sores. And if I had this in Auschwitz or while I was in camp, it would have been my end. Fortunately, I didn't have that problem.
Now so you used to sleep out of doors in the
No.
in the barracks,
in
but
the
without heat.
barracks. In the barracks, just left in here. Here already we had these beds.
Okay.
You know, there was three high up, just one for each person,
Mm-hmm.
and here already we had all kinds of people from Greece and different languages, and people from France, from all over, you know, and the place was cold. Naturally, we had a
Mm-hmm.
blankets of some type, and like I said before, people were saving some fruit, some bread
Mm-hmm.
for next morning, and you hear always screaming, "Klapsy, klapsy," which means steal. The Greeks were speaking in their language. They are stealing, you know, because somebody was very hungry, and he saw this man as a piece of bread. He stole a bread, and it was rough. It was very difficult. But I think having friends together, I think it was a tremendous help.
How long did you remain in Braunschweig for?
I would say probably about 3 months or so. Could be less, could be a little more.
When did you leave, and where did you go to after
Well,
that?
after Braunschweig, let's see, I got to we got to left Auschwitz in November. I would say in January or perhaps early February we left Braunschweig, and we marched to a place not too far from Braunschweig, closer to the city of Hanover, called Wattenstadt. And this was, we were supposed to work in a place called Hermann Göring Werke, which means Hermann Göring's, he was named in his honor, Hermann Göring's Works, and we were supposed to work, but either the place has been bombed before we had a chance to work there, and so we never got to work in this place. We didn't work because we didn't work, we just stayed in a camp. And I remember we spent Passover in this camp because there was one person who was a rabbi from Hungary. And I remember things were really, I mean, by this time people were emaciated, more like skin and bone, but he didn't eat any bread. He had a son with him. He gave the son the bread that he received in Passover to his son. He didn't want to eat chametz. And we were in Wattenstadt for, I can't remember, a couple of weeks or a month, or I'm not sure how long we were there for a while. But here you saw people. What happened was people who were sick, and it was primarily people who were a little older. Youngsters somehow lasted longer. But people who were in their 30s, 40s, 50s, you could see they're swelling up. Their faces got puffy. Their feet got swollen. And it was a sign. It was only a question that it's all over for them. You know, I don't know whether it was typhus or degeneration or a combination of both, but you could see people getting this. You know, as soon as they start swelling up, they knew it's the end. And there were people lying. That people were so common to wake up in the morning and find somebody who's dead next to you or on the street, or his body was put outside. And not that you weren't affected, but you looked at it and you kept walking. Of course, there's much you could do. So.
Were you men and women together?
No, separate.
Men?
It's constantly separate. The only place we were together was in Auschwitz, but not in the same camp. There were women in a certain section. In Braunschweig, there was only males, and same thing in Wattenstadt. From Wattenstadt, we went to a larger camp called Ravensbrück. In Ravensbrück, there were ladies also, ladies' camp. Although I don't recall where we were, just segregated, and there was only men. And this was a very big concentration camp, and I'm not sure. I think here they had. It wasn't just a labor camp. It was a concentration camp, annihilation camp, and I think they had crematoria or gas chambers, but not 100% sure. And there was a rumor that we were going to be being taken to Switzerland for some reason, and there were rumors all along. I mean, even while we were in Auschwitz, while we were sitting and doing nothing, there were rumors that they saw Hungarian police and they're here to take us back to Hungary and they're going to be freed, and constant rumors where I had some hope was. But now here the rumors were that you're going to go to Switzerland, and this made us very, very happy. And then we received rations from the Red Cross. Canned for like canned cheese or meat, And a lot of people got very sick. Here we didn't eat for weeks or normal food, and suddenly you get this rich food, and they have been warned to be careful, eat thoroughly, and a lot of people died from the food from that they have gotten. But it turned out that we never got to. We didn't go anywhere from Ravensbrück. We stayed in Ravensbrück.
When did you arrive there? Do you recall?
Well, I must have been in Wattenstadt a couple of weeks. It was either in the end of March, I would say end of March, or maybe perhaps the beginning of April. And I was in Ravensbrück for a couple of weeks. And of all the places, I don't know why, Ravensbrück left the least impression on me. I can't tell you why. It was a big camp. They were all, it was a big in size, and there were people from all over Europe. I mean, all kind of nationalities. I mean, like the story of the Tower of Babel. That's what this was. It was all kind of languages spoken, and people were, again, same condition, very sick and poor, not poor, but emaciated and like flies. And we were here for a couple of weeks, and then we were taken to another city. Again, no reason. You're never told where you're going.
So you did not do any work in Ravensbrück?
No work in Ravensbrück.
Were you in regular barracks?
Yes, I was in regular barracks. And I cannot give you the description just what the barracks were like. I cannot remember what Ravensbrück, but we were there for a couple of weeks. I remember it was a big camp. It was similar in size, not size, but similar to Auschwitz, as wire fences, and it was not like Braunschweig was only for the people who got there from Auschwitz, a couple hundred people. This was a camp with thousands and thousands of people. And we were there for a couple of weeks. From there, we went to put into the train again, and went to a city called Rubin, which was near Hamburg, up north. And we were taken out and taken to a camp called Rubin, and here they had Russian prisoners of war. They were in much better condition. They were stronger. I guess the food was a little better because they were under supervision of the Red Cross. By the way, the Red Cross hasn't done a thing. I never seen anybody from Red Cross. They didn't care, or they didn't make an attempt to help. The Red Cross wasn't of no help to the Jewish people anywhere. Evidently, in prisoners of war camps, they did do some work because, for example, I saw these Russian soldiers. They were in much better condition, and by this time I was so weak that there were no chairs. By the way, there was no such thing as chairs and tables. Wherever there were beds, like I described to you in Braunschweig, there were beds to sleep on. There was no chair or a table or a mat or a couch to sit down. There was no such thing. So we sat on the floor. If we ate and wanted to sit, we sat on the floor. And by the time I was in the city of Rubin, I was in such poor condition that if I sat, I could not get up. I had to crawl to a wall or something, or to a bed, and pull myself up. That's how things were. And here, you went to the bathroom. There were people lying all over the place. Dead people all over, and you had to climb over people. That was just the norm of the day. And here we were here for a couple of weeks. Again, no work was being done. We didn't know what's happening, why we were being shifted. But we knew why we were being moved around, because the Russian army, the Russian front was coming in closer and closer. And they were they didn't want these people to be liberated. Their purpose was to kill them off. And for some reason or other, there was, I guess, communication between the government or whoever was in charge of this department in the German army, or was not done properly, was not done in time. So we were in this camp, and one day but anyway, this camp was really, of all the places, was the most devastating, because by now we had no strength. Not me, anybody. I mean, people were after going through this, not eating, and it was just horrible. And we were put into a train. At night we were put into a train, and again, we're not told where we're going. And the train, which was, the tracks were not too far from the camp, and there was SS, the officers all around, and the train is not moving. And at night, in the middle of the night, the train was bombed. The engine of the train, the locomotive of the train was bombed. And some people who were close to the locomotives were killed in the train. And then in the morning we wake up, and slowly we don't see the German soldiers. The German soldiers are gone. And we are told to get out of the train and go back to the camp.
Who was telling you this?
Well, I don't know whoever was in charge, whoever was left there. What happened was, we were put into a train, and we were supposed to be taken out to the woods and destroyed by the German army. You know, this was our final solution: to destroy those who are still alive, because the Russian, American armies is from all around, and destroy us. And when the American planes bombed the locomotive, we couldn't move. And by this time, I imagine the German soldiers were hysterical. They were out to skin their own skin, and they just took off and they left us alone. And we came back, and in a little while, American soldiers. We saw one American soldier come into the army camp. It just happened he was a Jewish soldier, and if we can dream of an angel, to see an angel, you couldn't think of more than to see an American soldier. Was unbelievable. So this is how we were liberated. You know, it was in this city, and the American army came, and they were trying to be very, very helpful, from chocolate to chocolate, or whatever food they had again, and people started to eat, and they ate things that they shouldn't have eaten after starvation, and a lot of people died for eating carelessly, eating rich food that your stomach was not adjusted to. And this is where I was liberated. But I have to mention to you a scene that, to tell you more about the Germans. This city of where the camp was close to a city. It was in a town of Wibbelin, and Wibbelin was not very far from the city of Ludwigslust. And they brought in the American army, brought in the mayor, all the officials of the town of Wibbelin, and from Ludwigslust to see what's taking place in the camp. And are you aware of what is taking place in these camps? And that's just no, we don't know. They were innocent. They didn't know what is happening. While the smell permeated the entire town, or it was, you know, the smell of the dead people. They didn't know what was happening. And furthermore, they saw trains coming in with people and trucks. They didn't know. So they brought him in. They said, well, if you don't know, we want you to come with us. And they brought him into Wibbelin, and they bought some trucks. And they made these people, the officials of the town of Ludwigslust and Wibbelin, take some dead people who were lying all around, put them on trucks in white sheets, and take them into the city of Ludwigslust. And the city of Ludwigslust is quite a big city, and they had a castle, a beautiful castle. In front of the castle, they made these German officials dig graves in a circular form, just as symbolically. And they made people who were in these camps, dead people, bury, and they put up a little sign that and naturally, and there was a chaplain who made a speech here, and it so happens that it was American chaplain who made a speech, and I have gotten hold of a speech that was made in that particular place and other places. And I just want you to know, I'm jumping from place to place. I happened to be back in Germany 2 years ago, and I was curious to see what is happening, where these things in front of this castle. And I got to this castle, it was 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'm looking around and I don't see any graves here, no signs. And I go inside and I ask the lady who's selling cards and picture postcards or whatever. He says, there were some graves over here, after the war. What happened to these graves? She says, oh, those are beyond, further beyond. I said, where further? He said, beyond the water. But I remember this was right in front of the castle. So I go further beyond, and I look, and I see a little, a piece of a stone with names that people were buried in this area from different nationalities. Nothing about Jews, from mentions French, German. They probably have been French Jews, but they were primarily Jews, nothing about Jews. Of course, this was part of East Germany. Mm-hmm. So I go back to the lady. I said, I saw that metal, that stone that you have there. You can't even see it. It's covered with grass. I said, what happened to the graves? So, oh, the graves. He says that the different nationalities of Europe demanded that they repatriate these people to the countries where they come from. Now, these people had no identification. There was no demand for repatriation. They didn't want to have any graves of Jews in front of their castle. So in time, this was under communist rule. It didn't really matter about whose rule. So there was no sign where the camp was. I have some pictures of where the camp was. It's all plowed up, and there's nothing. They have a little museum where very little is mentioned in the museum that there's a camp over here. Mm-hmm. There's a little monument there, but so this is how I was liberated. And I was in bad shape. I was taken to American trucks came within a couple of days. I was in no position to leave the camp, because I couldn't walk. Those who were able went to town, and they went to German homes, and they helped themselves whatever they could to food, or clothing, or whatever. And they were probably not very nice to the Germans, And the Germans were very upset. Why weren't they more humane? How come they are so mean to the German population? Well, they haven't been nice to the Germans, but I don't know of any killings of things of that sort to that extent, but they helped themselves whatever they were missing, and they brought back things to the camp, food, whatever. I was eventually taken by truck to a hospital in Ludwigslust, and I was
an American hospital.
Under American hospital under American military supervision, and we were given food and cigarettes, but cigarettes was a form of exchange, because for cigarettes you could get different things, and slowly I was there for a couple of weeks, and then eventually we were taken from Germany from this hospital by the Red Cross to Sweden by boat.
How did you travel to Sweden?
By boat. We went to the city of Lübeck, which is a northern part, the closest. It's a seaport, and from Lübeck we were taken to the city of Helsingborg, which again is a seaport.
From what port did you leave from?
From Lübeck. Lübeck is the name of the city in Germany.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
And Helsingborg is a city in Sweden.
Okay.
So we left. We were taken to Lübeck.
Okay.
Boarded a type of boat, and it was a very short trip, probably a couple of hours, and we're in Sweden.
Before you continue, do you remember at what point you knew that your brother and sister had been taken out from Auschwitz? Do you recall?
Well, no, I don't know. When I left Auschwitz, I did not know. I did not know whether my brother and sister are still there. However, I have a friend who survived the war who was with him, and he says there came a time when it was bad. First of all, there were no more transfers coming in, and it was dangerous for them also to be in Auschwitz, because what happened was people who worked in this, for example, in this transport, or people who worked in the crematoria, every so often they were killed off because they knew they had too much information. And they just killed them off because they tried to protect themselves. They shouldn't know, yes, there were millions of people killed here. So they only worked in these places for a couple of months, and then they were burned off, they were gassed off. So he decided to leave, and my brother said, no, he's not leaving yet for some reason. I mean, there was no, you don't know what is right, what is wrong. Whatever your mind dictated, that's what you have done. And my brother remained. Probably, I would assume that he eventually left also, because most people, not too many people left in Auschwitz. So I would assume, but this is purely assumption, my sister and brother both left Auschwitz, but I never heard from them, and they didn't survive the war.
Okay. After arriving in Sweden.
No, well, I have to mention this to you.
Yeah.
I know when this was happening, I didn't give much thought, or was not very philosophical. How did this happen? I mean, after all of us human beings, whether you're a Jew or Christian or Muslim, it doesn't matter. You're a Jew. I mean, you're a human being. Mm-hmm. How could this have happened? And by different people of Europe, and particularly Germany. Germany had the highest culture of, and how could they have done this? Go into homes and taking people who are completely innocent, who didn't harm the war effort. It wasn't like a war being bombed and taking children and gassing and this gives me constant food for thought. What happened? How could this have happened? And I'm coming to the. I'm not coming. I've came to this conclusion a long time ago, and I don't even talk about my experiences. For many years, I never spoke. People didn't even know that I was in a concentration camp. But years later, I did talk more and more about it because I felt it's my obligation, because people are denying that these things never happened. And I don't go out of my business to make announcements. If people ask me questions, I will tell them. I'm not denying anymore. I will talk more freely about it. But so I'm giving it more and more thought. And I said, how could have this happened? And the example that I give is like in a picture a scene where where gas escapes from a stove, for example, or a gas thing escapes, and you have gas in the room. Now you can live in the room. I mean, you can. It's not pleasant, you know. The gas permeates the room, but you can live there if the gas is X amount and no more. But should anybody light a match, then the whole thing will blow up. Mm-hmm. Or, for example, you take a piece of ground and you fertilize it very well. It's a very rich soil. And you drop a seed, it will grow immediately. And I consider Hitler to be the match, that he struck a match and everything blew up. Or he was that seed that all you have to do is the soil, the society was prepared for this for centuries, preaching, and unfortunately, I have to say the source was the church preached hatred of Jews because they did not accept Christ. That they were not determined. What is the right word? They were branded to suffer and be persecuted, and this was the preaching of centuries and centuries of hatred, to various degrees in different countries. And Hitler didn't have much of a job to do. He didn't have much to do because things were prepared. And I really, there were other, it's not as simple as that, but there were other reasons also. But I find this is one of the primary cause of why what happened could have taken place so quickly from 1933, when Hitler came to power, to 1945. What happened was, I'm talking about one family. This happened all over Europe. And more or less, to a less degree, some suffered much more. Polish people suffered much, much more because with them it started in 1939. With us it happened in 1944. But for this to happen so quickly is, the mind cannot conceive this, cannot understand this. So I mentioned this, that a lot has to be done and we know quite well that governments knew, the United States, Roosevelt knew, people escaped, they had documentation that what's happening in Auschwitz, that people being killed, they didn't bomb the tracks leading to Auschwitz. The Pope knew, because the hierarchy, the church had people all over Europe, especially in Poland. They had the information. Nothing was done. Very little was said. Individual people did help, but as an organized church, they did not help. I know in Hungary, the church didn't lift its finger while the Jews were being deported. They had a tremendous party in this particular city that I heard of. The party was going on while the Jews are being taken away, and I hold to a great extent the church responsible for this happening. And it wasn't just the Nazis of Germany, it was Germany. Germans. It was hundreds and thousands of people. A lot of them were good people and helpful on an individual basis. But it was done by the country as a whole, not by a small segment of Nazis or SS people.
What do we have?
We have
Oh, no, we'll go to another tape. Okay, we're going to take a break now,
Okay.
and then we'll